All right, let's talk about some of the most fundamental ideas when we talk about the self. So lots of work has been done on identity, both from a sociological and psychological approach. But there are some classic ideas that social psychologists still very much hold to, even though they've been around for quite some time. And those are the concepts by Charles Cooley and George Herbert Mead. So in particular, with Cooley, what I want to highlight is an idea called the looking glass self. Now, the looking glass self proposes that our identity is shaped, our sense of self is shaped, not necessarily by what others think of us, or even what we think of ourselves, so much as it is fundamentally shaped by what we think other people think about ourselves, right? So when we imagine how other people see us, and then further we imagine the judgment they come to, whether that's a high appraisal of us or something not so great, right? We have to be able to take the position, sort of like imagine ourselves seeing our own selves through their eyes, and then imagine what is it that they see when they look at us. Do they like us? Do they think we're funny? Do they think we're attractive? Do they think we're mean, right? And that our sense of self is really powerfully shaped, not necessarily just by our own self-esteem and how we see us, and not even directly based on how other people see us, because we can we may not care what they think, or we may not know what they think, but very powerfully our sense of self is shaped by what we think they think. And of course we could be wrong, right? You make a big joke in the middle of a group of friends and everyone's laughing and you think you're hilarious, and you think that they think you're hilarious, but maybe they're laughing at you, not with you, right? So there's the possibility that we're mistaken, but nevertheless, our sense of self is really powerfully shaped by how we imagine others seeing us and the judgment we assume that they then carry towards us. Now let's move to some of Mead's ideas. So for one, George Herbert Mead has this idea of the I and the me. And they're two very important parts of ourselves. You can think of the I as the more spontaneous or impulsive part of the self, whereas the me is a little more organized and reflective, right? So the I, you can almost think of it as a time orientation. The I is always in the present. What you're experiencing right now and how you're just spontaneously reacting to any given situation, that's your I, right? It has agency. But the me is this more socialized self that can take on a judgment of ourselves or a perspective of ourselves in the past, or can think about the kind of person we are or trying to become in the future, right? So from a time orientation, the I is in the now, but the me, because it can be reflective, can project into the past or the future. The me, might look at a behavior we did in the moment and go, oh my gosh, why'd I do that? Right? So back to that example of you tell a joke and everyone laughs, and then maybe later you're like, oh, that was an inappropriate joke, or oh, maybe I shouldn't have said so much, or what have you, right? In the moment, it's sometimes hard. Now, the I can be conditioned by the me, so that way, when you're well socialized and you've internalized thoughts and behaviors and certain orientations, the I may in the moment react differently, so based on how you're being socialized or re-socialized into the future, the I may do in the moment choices that are not, the same as it would have been if you were socialized differently. But it's the me that is that reflective self, formed through social interaction, and has in many ways, you could almost say it's what sets us apart from animals, right? So animals have an I. They have this cognizant, awareness of their immediate situation. They react to stimuli. But I doubt that, dogs or monkeys or, whatever are reflecting on the kind of dog they're becoming years into the future. And I don't know that dogs, when they bite someone, look back on that and go, oh, I'm such a jerk. That's not the kind of dog I want to be, right? And so it's this additional kind of ability to take ourselves as an object and reflect on who we are, who we're becoming, that the me represents. And the last idea I want to touch on is Mead's idea of the generalized other. And this is very relevant to the me, of the I and the me, because this generalized other has a lot to do with the socialization we experience in society, the norms and the rules that we think that we're supposed to follow. So you can think of the generalized other as a kind of audience that you carry around in your mind all the time, right? And so different people, based on their socialization, might have different audience members, right? And so what are the people or the core institutions that you really think highly of in terms of wanting to live up to their expectations? So for one person, that might be their religious community, or for another, their parents or close family, or for another, their immediate peer group or romantic partner, or how their kids see them, because their identity is really connected to this idea of being a good parent. It could be the idea of God watching you, right? So, when you're alone and you do some action, right, that's still social action, right? You've still been socialized to behave in certain ways and to think certain ways about your own behavior, even when you're by yourself. But the question to understand your generalized audience is, when you're alone and you do something and you evaluate that as either a good thing or a bad thing that you did, what audience are you imagining is watching you, right? Who is evaluating you? Is it just yourself? Because Mead would say that we tend to carry around these kind of phantom audiences, this generalized other, where we've internalized a watcher, right? Have you ever driven up to a intersection and there's a camera there and you don't know who's watching, but you behave a little differently at an intersection when you know there's a camera watching you? And Mead says that we sort of internalize a watcher, if you will, and that shapes our behavior in a variety of situations, even when we're by ourselves. But it can be instructive and insightful to ask yourself, well, who's on the other side of that lens? Who's in the audience of your generalized other? Who is it that is watching you? And then when you imagine them watching you and you imagine how they evaluate you, who is on the other side of that mirror, of that camera? Right? And then we've gone all the way back to the looking glass self by Cooley, right? Because we're imagining what they think of us, and that shapes who we are and how we assess ourselves.